welcome to another episode of the Out of Office Club. Thank you for listening again this week. It is getting cold and I don't like it. I was definitely not made for the cold. Also not really for the heat, but definitely not the cold. If you're watching this on YouTube, you might see that I'm in a different location. I did not change spots. I'm still at my work exchange in the south of Italy, close to Ostuni, but they simply gave me a different room because this one is just a little bit nicer. It's got a kitchen, but there were people staying in here before. The two girls that were also here for a work exchange, they left last weekend. So now it is just me, but I did get the nice room. And in case you hear any purring, because I don't know if it's picking that up, but I've got a cat here who sneaked into the room because I happened to not watch. So now it's here, which is really nice. And yeah, I've been doing well. Had another good weekend. The Italian came here again, so we went and explored a little bit again, but I also had to work, of course, for my work exchange. In case you missed it, I'm doing a work exchange in the south of Italy for 6 weeks, helping out in the hotel restaurant, doing a bit of reception work, as well as helping out as a waitress sometimes during breakfast in the morning. Just a couple hours a day, 5 days a week, and it allows me to stay here for free. And they also cover most of my costs for food. So it's absolutely perfect. And so far it has been really, really nice. The people here are so friendly. Once I leave, I'll of course give a lot more detail about where exactly I am and what I'm doing here. But for now, I'm keeping that a bit vague. Of course, as you know, about online safety. But it is still a very nice place. And I'll share more about that soon, like in 3-4 weeks when I leave. So if you're curious, don't forget to check out my social media, especially Instagram is where I'm very active. And today I wanted to talk about a topic that I teased a bit, I think 2 weeks ago. I don't think it was last week. I think the week before, where people ask me very often how I afford this lifestyle. And I wanted to give you the honest truth about this because I feel like many people have a wrong idea of traveling full-time and digital nomad life and how expensive it is or is not. So that's what I wanted to tackle today and give you, like I said, an honest overview of how I actually afford to do this, because I have been a freelancer for 6 years now, almost. And for all of those 6 years I've traveled, but for 2 years I've done it full time. So I think I'm quite qualified to talk about this, especially because I've gone from making no money to making a lot of money to making no money again to now being okay again. So I've also gone through all the stages, which I think most freelancers will, or most digital nomads will. So let's dive into that. So yeah, this is a very good episode if you're wondering about how to actually live as a digital nomad and what it will cost and how to make it work. This is absolutely perfect. So let's talk. Well, first, like I just said, your income definitely won't be stable all year long, especially, at least not to me. Okay, everything I'm telling you is from personal experience. I am not an expert in business, in freelancing, in setting up all these systems, in working online. Not at all. I'm just a normal, regular person trying their best online. I'm not some guru. I'm not an expert. So, of course, there'll be people online saying that they have it all figured out 100 times better and they're making so much money, and completely fair. And I hope that is true. For me, it is not. So let me just say, for me, as a freelancer who's just, trying her best, my income is not stable every year. It's not stable every month. It varies a lot. And I think that's also something I talked about in the last podcast. That is something you have to be okay with. That's for sure. If you work for yourself as a freelancer, your income will vary. It really is depending on the season, depending on what happens in the world. And it depends a lot on your own effort. generally, the more you put in, the more you get out. And then it's a bit of luck as well. Sometimes things just don't work out. Clients cancel, projects fail, or get cancelled as well. And that suddenly then leaves you with a lot less income. You make mistakes. I've also messed up projects, and those things happen, but they impact your income, of course, directly. And that's something else I wanted to mention, of course. There are different ways to do the digital nomad life. I've always been a freelancer, but I also know digital nomads who work for a company, who work remote. And of course, what you get then is you have actually, sorry, I got distracted. You have a bit more stable income because you just work directly for a company, but you work remote, which means you technically get to live as a digital nomad, but you don't have the instability that comes with being a freelancer. So that, of course, is already a very good option for anyone who feels like they don't have or want to build the skills to be a freelancer, or would just rather have that stability, which I think is very valid. That would work for many people. I personally don't like it because it also means that they own your time and they get to tell you what to work on, when to work. Generally, of course, there's exceptions, but they will probably ask you to be online between certain times on certain days. And because I'm a freelancer, I don't have that. So those are the two distinctions. And I'm mainly just talking about my experience as a freelancer, plus the general costs that come with traveling and being a digital nomad. But yeah, my income definitely varies every month. Some months are good, some months are not good. Good to know. When I started, I was fresh out of university. I had absolutely no experience running my own business or being a freelancer for that matter. I've only ever worked in a big company for 6 months, and that was only as a intern. 2 weeks in an office, 6 months as an intern. COVID happened as well, so I basically did nothing. I did then start a lot of my own projects that I did on the side, not necessarily to make money, but just to do something, so I was quite bored. And then I graduated, started my own company officially. If you've been listening to my podcast more or saw more of my content, you might know that one of my first clients was my dad's company. So I then had a camper that I built with my then boyfriend. And I started traveling with my camper on my own while also working and trying to grow my business. I think during that time I was making around 800, maybe 1,000 euros a month. So not that much, especially considering from the Netherlands. North of Europe is a bit more expensive. I was living in Germany at the time, also not the cheapest. So 800 to 1,000 euros a month is not a lot for those countries. And I was also working with Dutch clients who did pay, of course, a little bit better. But still, it wasn't a lot, especially not compared to my costs. But I did make it work. I just did a lot of wild camping. I cooked myself. My most expensive thing was gas and the occasional campsite. But I make that work. Now, if you fast forward then a couple years, especially a couple years ago, I was doing pretty well. At some point, my company made, I think, 10K a month. And then this year, again, if you followed my podcast before or my story, you know, I basically lost everything. I made some very bad decisions for my business, for myself. I didn't manage certain projects and clients well, so I got fired from those projects, rightly so. And then at the same time, other projects were cancelled because of budget. They couldn't agree in the company, or they just simply needed to take a break because they were restructuring. Whatever it was, altogether, I basically lost most of my income overnight within 2 weeks. And I've since then rebuilt it to a decent amount. But yeah, that uncertainty, that instability in income, I think that comes a bit with freelancing. Of course, the better you manage it, the less you will have that instability. I know freelancers that probably have things managed a bit better than I do, and they have more systems in place, better contracts, better monthly retainers, and their income will be better. My income also was stable for a long time, but shit happens, I think. Learned a lot from that, especially what I do and don't want, what I should pay attention to, what my skills are, what they are definitely not. It's how it goes, I think. So knowing that, let me tell you what this lifestyle actually costs. Because, like I said, I've done van life, which wasn't super cheap, but it definitely wasn't expensive because I did a lot of wild camping. I cooked myself. I kept it very simple. And I have also lived a lot more luxurious, let's say. There was, for example, I stayed in Valencia for a month, or for 3 months in the end, but my first month there was definitely the most expensive because I didn't plan things very well. And as you might know, once I got to Valencia, I went there for someone I was dating, who then dumped me 3 days later. So I had nothing planned, nothing booked. Suddenly I had to go, and I also wanted to leave his apartment. So I had to find an Airbnb, all a mess. That Airbnb then cost me, I think, if I remember correctly, about 1,200 euros for a month, which is expensive. Okay, that is generally not what I spent on accommodation every month. Keep in mind, everything depends on where you go. I think that's the main thing. But yeah, Valencia was very expensive. Also, then when I went to Japan, it was expensive. I think I spent 1,400 on an apartment in Osaka for a month. And then next to accommodation, which is generally my main cost, I would say, apartments are just expensive in most places. And apart from that, of course, flights, insurance, food, activities. I think those are my main costs. Yeah, and sometimes it's very cheap, sometimes it's very expensive, and it also just depends on what you want to do. I also went to a surf camp, for example, in Sri Lanka, which is in general a cheaper country. And keep in mind, when I say expensive and cheap, this is all from a perspective of someone from the Netherlands. That, to me, is cheap because of how I grew up and what the norm is in my country, in the Netherlands. So that's what I compare it to. So just, I don't know, maybe that's not the best thing to do anyway. But yeah, Sri Lanka, for someone from North Europe, is a cheaper country to go to just because it costs less for us to be there than to be in our own country. I did a surf camp there, which cost me about a ridiculous amount, like 2,000 euros for a month. But then it also included all of my surf lessons, my food, my accommodation. And then a month later, I stayed in my own apartments for a month, and I spent maybe 400 euros on accommodation. So all of that to say that accommodation is my biggest cost, but you can make it as cheap and as expensive as you want it to. Sometimes I'll splurge a bit more and I'll get a bit of a better apartment just because I want to be in a certain area, or I just really want something a bit more fancy. Sometimes I don't really care, or I can find a really good option in a good location and then I can save a bit. It just really, really depends. So roughly, I'll say like an average, what I spend on accommodation every month is around 800 euros. And that is for my own apartment, so my own Airbnb, sometimes a co-living space. But generally, I don't stay in hostels anymore. I did that a lot when I was backpacking, and I loved it. I've spoken about accommodation before, I think, and hostels are great to meet people, to travel, but they're awful to live and sleep in. And especially because I'm also working, I don't want to do that. So I stay in my own apartments, Airbnbs, for anywhere from 800 to 1,000 euros a month. I try and stay under 1,000, I think. So that's generally my cost. But again, it can be cheaper in some countries. And then the next one that I think you should think about is insurance. I, of course, have an international health insurance. I have a travel insurance. I have a cancellation insurance. I think I have quite a few. I think those are the main ones. Yeah. And that costs me around, I want to say 300 euros a month. International health insurance is expensive. I got extra dental because my teeth suck. So yeah, that also is a bigger cost. I am covered worldwide apart from the US for obvious reasons. So that is more expensive. Some countries offer better or cheaper health insurances or travel insurances, but this to me made sense to me. You know, it worked for me based on how I travel, where I live, what I do. So, but keep that in mind. Insurances can be a bit expensive, and I do highly recommend to get insurance. I mean, you are traveling, you do have more risk. You might stay in places that, I don't know, are a bit sketchy, or you eat something bad. Things can happen. You want to be insured. And then, of course, it's just my day to day. Flights cost me a bit of money, but not that much, I would say, mainly because I travel so slow. So I only take a flight maybe once a month, and usually not that far. Like next year, the plan is to do one big flight to Thailand and then stay in Asia. So then within Asia, my costs of transportation will be quite low. Unless I have to go back to Europe, then of course it's a bit higher. But I can manage flights quite well. And when I want to spend a bit more or less, depending, of course, also on my income. Then there's food, which you can also make very cheap. If you just eat pasta with some tuna every night, it's going to be a lot cheaper than if you would go out to restaurants. And generally, especially when I'm alone or I'm in a more expensive country, I'll eat my breakfast at home. I have lunch and dinner at home. I eat very plain, very simple. And then occasionally, if there's an opportunity, I go out with other people because I rather spend money again on experiences than on things. So I will try and save up the money that I have to spend it on experiences instead of just things. Even just going to restaurants, I rather than save that for going out to restaurants with other people than by myself, unless it's a place I really, really want to try. Otherwise, I save that up. But yeah, all in all, I would say on average, my monthly costs, just costs, will be around 12 to 1300 euros for my Airbnb, my insurances, and then maybe some food. So let's say 1500 as a base. I have been in countries where I've spent in a whole month maybe 500 euros because accommodation was so cheap, food was cheap. It really depends. But I think that gives you a good idea of that this lifestyle does not necessarily have to be expensive, because keep in mind, I'm not even traveling the cheapest way I could be. I am already spoiled. If you want to do this even cheaper, you could stay in hostels, never eat out, only eat or only cook. You could do less activities, less tours, whatever it is. There's ways to do this lifestyle even cheaper than what I do it. But I think the way I do it is very nice. I don't need more than this. I don't need very fancy apartments. I'm completely fine with the way I do it right now. It's nice, it's comfortable. I like a smaller apartment. I don't want a massive apartment. And so yeah, it could be fancier, but I don't think there's any need. And again, I think that's also the good part about traveling so slow. I think traveling slowly allows you to save more money because you get a monthly discount if you book something for a month. So even on Airbnb, I think even on Booking, if you book for a month, you get a monthly discount, which is quite nice. So instead of spending 60 euros a night, you're now only spending 40 a night, which makes it already a lot more affordable. Same goes for cooking. Because you've booked for a month, generally I book something with the kitchen. I'm not in a hotel. I've got an actual apartment, which means I have a kitchen. I can cook for myself. And also because I have a month, I don't actually spend that much on activities or tours. I can do a lot myself. I can take a bit longer to get certain places. I can spread out those costs more. So instead of being in a new place every week and every week feeling like I have to book something to see everything, I've got a whole month to do that. And by the time I've done all the activities, I've generated new income. I can go to the next place, and do it again. And that's the benefit of slow travel. Um, so yeah, I kind of forgot where I was going. Oh, that's the tricky thing about doing these podcasts and not editing. Sometimes I kind of lose it. But as I was saying, slow travel also helps you save some money. Yeah, so yeah, you could do this cheaper. And I think what I'm doing right now is even a really good example because I am doing a work exchange, which means I stay here for free. I get my food for free. I help out for about 5 hours a day. And I basically have no costs. There's nothing for me to do here really. It's a bit remote. So all I do is just work. I make my own food. I talk with people that also work here, which is really nice. In the weekend, of course, now I have my friend who comes here and we go and explore. But it's very simple and it's because of that incredibly cheap. I don't spend much money unless I go out in the weekend. So this is also a really, really good way to start traveling. And also the reason I did this is because I wanted to save money. It's very simple. Again, there have been months that were really great. There have been months that were not so good. And there are ways to make traveling just a lot cheaper. I think in general, if you're just really flexible with how you travel, you will find a way to do this cheaper. I book flights on the day that it is the cheapest. The day I'm flying to Thailand I think that flight was 200 or maybe 300 euros cheaper than if I would take it a week earlier. So because I can be so flexible with my travel days, I also get to save quite a bit of money because I don't have to leave on a certain day. I can do whatever. So I already save money on that. And then, of course, if you know that your income isn't as stable, you always try and save up. So in the last years, I've always made sure that I saved up money, which I'm happy I did because I definitely needed it this year, unfortunately. But now, I'm going to build that back up and I'll be fine. But I think it's a good example. Like I basically lost all my income in the beginning of this year, had to use most of my savings to make it work. I went back to the Netherlands, which meant I stayed with family, so I had no costs. I figured out I had different collaborations after that, which allowed me to go and stay for free. Now I'm doing a work exchange, which allows me to stay here for free so that I can live and not worry too much about the money part because honestly, I don't really have it at the moment while still working and saving up so that hopefully, next year I'll be in a financially better position. And it gives me a lot less stress because that is, I think, a misconception that so many people have. I've even had people say to me like, "Oh, but you're a digital nomad, so you're rich." I think probably 99% of digital nomads are not rich. Or maybe 90%. I don't know. I just think that the ones that you see a lot on social media like to say that they are rich because it looks good and they can flaunt this lifestyle. And I'm sure some of them have it. Like I'm not doubting that. I just don't think that's the reality for 90%. But maybe I'm wrong about this and I'm just telling myself that to feel better. Let me know what you think about that though. Because that's something I've noticed a lot, which I also want to clarify. Before, in the beginning of the podcast, I said that my company was making 10,000 euros a month. When you heard that, you might have thought, oh, wow, that's so much money. It is. But keep in mind, when anyone says my company, or even when they even just say I made, and then a number, it's really good to understand that when a company makes 10,000 euros, that doesn't mean that's 10,000 euros in profit. I did not earn 10,000 euros a month. That's what I invoiced. But from that, I had still so many costs, other people I had to pay. Not much of that was profit and was actual income. So whenever someone says, oh, my company made 50,000 a month, great. But then ask yourself how much of that was cost and how much of that is actual profit. Because in the end, especially if you're a freelancer or you work on your own, that is what is important. And during that time, to handle all the work I had to hire 3 or 4 other freelancers to help me with that work. So I definitely didn't make 10K, not even nowhere near it. My company made money, but it also left very quickly. So keep that in mind. I think when you see these people online talking about how much money they made, it's good to kind of be critical and ask yourself, is that really what they have in their hands at the end of the month to spend? Or is that just in their company now, being saved up for future costs? Yeah. So keep that in mind, because I just don't think that many people earn that much. I even know digital nomads that earn less than me and they make it work. I know some that earn more than me, but they have more costs, or they just have a different standard of living. I know others that make a lot of money and they live even less luxurious than I do, that live even simpler, and they still do work exchanges. Or it just really depends on what you want to do and how you want to live, and that's how expensive it will be. But I just want to make sure that people understand that to be a digital nomad does not mean that you have to be rich or that you will be rich. It's not like this lifestyle will give you money, unfortunately. And traveling full time, to me, is probably cheaper than staying in the Netherlands. Of course, that 100% depends on where you're from. And I have the privilege that I'm Dutch, that my country is rich, I would say. I don't know how else to put it. And that for me, living in the Netherlands would cost me more than living in many other countries in the world. So for me, I think even just economically, it makes sense not to be in the Netherlands. It's also just not really a place I want to be. But in general, I think there's nicer places in the world, so I'd rather go there. But yeah, for me, it just makes sense to travel full time. There's nothing keeping me in the Netherlands in terms of like a partner. Of course, I got friends and family, but I still get to see them often when I visit or go back. But yeah, this lifestyle is as expensive and as cheap as you make it. You could easily spend 500 euros a month, or you can spend 5,000 a month. It just really depends on how you want to live. Remember that it is very normal if your income quite fluctuates, especially if you work as a freelancer. Your costs also every month will be different. That is something I still struggle with. I know a lot of people that, they have their income, that stable income, and then they budget and they go, this month much goes here, this much goes here. And I find that very tough because my income is kind of different every month, depending on how much I've spent with my company, how much I could invoice. But it's, yeah, I don't know. It's still possible, I think, to do all of this, even with less income and even if it is less stable. I think if you really want to, you can make this work with many types of income. You just have to make sure that you find something that allows you to travel while you work. I think that's the toughest thing for most people. I do, of course, always recommend to have some money saved up, just because traveling comes with risks. Being a freelancer, working remote in whatever way comes with risks, So it is always good to have some savings. Make sure you're prepared for unexpected costs, because those will come when you travel, 100%. And after that, it's about making sure that your costs stay low. I think it's very easy to kind of collect all of these costs and subscriptions and things that you don't really need, that you get, especially if you do have a stable income. It's just easy. And then when you start traveling, you have to let all of that go, try to minimize your costs, get rid of things you really just don't need. Try and budget as much as you can, figure out how much you are potentially earning for that month, what your costs are. I think if you truly want this lifestyle, you can make it work with many types of budgets. You don't have to be rich. I think that's the wrong mindset. I think it's more about how can I get to a stage where I feel comfortable? How can I get enough money so that I can live the lifestyle that I want? Because I will say right now, if I like now I'm staying here for free, but my other option would be staying in hostels if I really want to afford doing this. And that to me is not an option. I'm not staying in hostels. So try and figure out how much money you need to make to afford the lifestyle that you want. And for some people, that could be 500 euros a month. That's enough. For other people, that would be 2,000. Decide also then where you want to go. Of course, countries in Southeast Asia are going to be a lot cheaper than if you would go North Europe. So decide on a rough location, how much you would need, how you're going to get that. I would recommend always somewhere between 3 to 4 months of savings for that particular location that you want to go to. And then I think sometimes it's just really good to take that risk, put a bit of pressure behind yourself, put yourself in a situation where you have to make it work instead of staying in that comfort zone where even if you just mess around for a bit or you don't do so much, you'll be fine because you still have your stability. There's not so much pressure on it. So putting yourself in a bit of an uncomfortable situation where you have to make it work because now you're there, you're gonna have to do it. I think that's kind of what I did when I booked my flight to Thailand as well. I was like, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna figure it out and I'm going to make it work. I have still 2 months to prepare. And, I'm going to figure it out. I think that's good sometimes too, to just make that decision. Okay, I'm going to try. I want to be a digital nomad, or at least, I want to travel more or full time. And now's the time to just go and do it. Take that risk. But yeah, that is, I think, all I wanted to talk about today. I hope I gave you a bit of an idea of the costs of digital nomad life and that it really does not have to be expensive. Don't get me wrong, it is not cheap. Of course, living permanently in one place, especially if that is in a cheaper country, might be cheaper. But there are ways to be a digital nomad that are cheap. So figure out what works for you, what kind of income you would need to make that lifestyle work, and then I would say go and take that risk. I think it's more than worth it. So yeah, that is all I think for today. I'm gonna go make lunch or have lunch if they prepared it for me. That's so luxurious. Because it's a hotel restaurant, they generally make us lunch every day, which is amazing. So I'm gonna see if we have lunch today, and then I'm gonna go back to work because again, I'm going to Thailand in 2 weeks. My income is still not where I want it to be, so I have to go and work hard to try and make that work. But yeah, if you liked this episode, then please like, subscribe, everything. It really helps. And I also really like to see that it's being watched, that people enjoy it. Follow me on Instagram or anywhere else on social media. If you have any questions, just leave a comment wherever it is that you're watching or listening. And then I really hope to see you again next week. If you do have any questions or recommendations for topics, then definitely let me know in the comments. Always looking for inspiration. And then hopefully I see you next week. Bye bye.